And my name is Jackie Ellicott. I'm the recreation programmer at the Mississauga Senior Center and Carmen Corbison Community Center. And this is Saga Connections slash Older Adult Expo. So we're doing a double whammy here, and I'd like to thank the people who are here to present and also the people who are attending. And I'm going to hand it off to Katie to introduce.
All right. Good morning. My screen should be coming up here shortly. It looks like there's a little bit of a lag here, so let me know when you can see my screen and I will run through today. So as Jackie said, welcome. This is Saga Connections and the 2021 Virtual Older Adult Expo presented by Evergreen Retirement Community. We are using WebEx events for this, so it's a little different from our regular format that we use. Just a reminder, the toolbar along the bottom, you will find the mute and start video options. The important one during these sessions is the little orange box there with the reactions button. So that's where you can raise your hand, which will give us a notification that you have a question. And then at the bottom, you can also use the chat. And there's a question and answer that's been enabled. So if you have a question that you have for Gary or Brian, you can place that in there and we will go ahead and read that. Just some program guidelines. Number 1, act and speak respectfully. Number 2, one question at a time. Keep your mutes muted during the presentation and use the chat feature to ask questions, or we can wait until the end and we'll open the presentation as well. And just a reminder, this event is being recorded, so participants cannot be seen and will be muted. So today we are happy to have Fire and Emergency Services. We have Brian and Gary with us today, and we'll be learning about when to call 911, fire safety information, who to contact, prevention, education, and some detection. And also just a quick thank you again to our event sponsor, Evergreen Retirement Community. So we will go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome Brian here and Gary, and they will be taking over the presentation. And I'll keep an eye on the chat if anything comes up and questions as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for the warm welcome. Yeah, Kate, can you hear me okay? Just give me a little thumbs up if you can.
You're good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Great. And thank you, Jackie, as well, for the warm introduction. We're really excited to connect here with Saga Connections and the Older Adult Expo. I'm joined here today by my esteemed colleague, fire educator Brian Ertl. I'm going to ask educator Ertl to introduce himself shortly after. Maybe I'll introduce myself and some of what we're going to talk about today. And then he's going to kind of roll into some presentation material information for you. So to start with, my name is Gary Pike. I am the captain of the Public Education Division for the Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services. I've held this role since just February of this year, and since being here, it's probably been the best role I've held in the Mississauga Fire Service. Each time I've held a different role, I probably would have said that for each one as well. This one is extremely, extremely impactful. Got a fantastic team that I get to work with in public education. So I've got Brian Ertl. We have 3 other educators that we connect with, and we've got a brand new educator starting with us on July 5th of this year, who's going to have approximately 2 months of training and then come over to the Public Education Division. So we'll look forward to welcoming her. The Mississauga Fire Department is such a diverse department to work for, both culturally and then just in the roles that we play. It's fantastic in the sense that we offer so many services, and I'm just going to outline a few of them and talk about how we perform those, and then we'll get into the presentation topic. So we have in the Mississauga Fire Department, we have what we call the 3 lines of defense. All right, and they're in a specific order that we like to make sure we maintain that order. So first of all, we have our Public Education Division, which is where we make an attempt to connect with the public to curb long-term fire behaviors and just to give fire information that people can take home and implement and even share with their families. So that's the division that I get to work in alongside Educator Ertl. And we connect with people of all ages. So just on Monday yesterday, I was connecting with Brian and another colleague of ours with some kindergarten students and grade 1 students. The week prior, grade 5 students. We connect with adults, maybe young adults as well who are going off to college, as well as older adults, and then sometimes people with disabilities and new Canadians as well. And how do we decide who we connect with is all based on what we have, what's called a comprehensive risk assessment, which is an assessment that the city did of our municipality to determine where our risks are. So we understand that there's risks associated to young children, young adults going off to college, potentially going to dormitories that they might not be familiar with, and then older adults too that are coming across different changes in life. And we're going to kind of identify what some of those are with you today. That's our first line of defense, public education. The second one is enforcement, inspections and code enforcement. And what that is a role that actually I held for about 7 years with the city, where we'd go around the different buildings, and sometimes through building permit process or just through general fire code inspections, we'd be enforcing Ontario Building Code, fire code, or related standards, getting into people's homes upon request or complaint and checking for compliance as it relates to smoke alarm or carbon monoxide alarms. So where the public education hasn't connected with the person, we have our inspection and code enforcement division who can enforce those codes and standards. And then if all else fails, we have our third line of defense, which is our operations or our suppression division, which is more commonly known as our firefighters. So if the education, inspection, enforcement didn't work, unfortunately, we just had a really bad day or a moment, we now have our firefighters to perform life rescue services. So that could look like anything from ice or water rescue, high angle rescue. We could have, of course, a fire, medical emergencies, auto extrication, a wide variety of services the Mississauga Fire Department offers. We're fortunate enough to be completely supported by different divisions like mechanical, where we have a crew of, I think, almost 10 mechanics now, which are able to work on our trucks and the equipment that keep our trucks running and the tools that are on the trucks to make sure we can use them properly when we need them. And a strong administrative team that supports many of our initiatives, as well as a fire leadership team, which gives us that direction. So that's a little bit about the ins and outs of the Mississauga Fire Department. We have almost 700 full-time staff. I should say almost 800 now. I think we're around 760 full-time staff. We have a recruit class for inspection enforcement that's starting this summer, July 5th, where they have 12 new inspectors and approximately 20 new firefighters starting this fall. So really excited to welcome more people and allow them to join our great corporation and work in some of the great fire stations that we have throughout our city. So that's a little bit about Mississauga Fire. If you have some questions for me there, feel free to type them into the chat. And as Brian's presenting, I'll be able to respond a little bit in there. Or you can choose to save them until the end, and around 11:40, 11:45, we'll wrap up and we can have 10 to 15 minutes of questions if you like. So without further ado, I mentioned our esteemed colleague here, Educator Earl. I'm going to throw it over to Brian to introduce himself and maybe some of the presentation information that he's going to be covering. Thank you, Brian.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Captain Pike, for that introduction. Again, my name is Brian Ertl, and I'm an educator with Public Education Division. And I've been doing this role for just about the last year and a half. Year and a half. And before I got into public education, I was a firefighter with Mississauga Fire, and I was running on the trucks for about 15 years. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to become an educator, to share my experiences as a firefighter and the things that I've seen and the things that I've done, and lend that to my new role as a public educator. Because really, it's been proven that education is the way to keep people safe or safer from fires or emergency events from even happening. So an educated public is really valuable to us and to the public as well. So yeah, I love my job as a firefighter. I still get to contact with all my former crewmates and all that. But this role I even find more important because now I can get a message out to the public on how to stay safe, how to prevent fires, how to prevent accidents from happening. So, and you'll see behind my shoulder, Sparky the Fire Dog. He's usually up there for my school classes, but I didn't really have a nice background. So Sparky's kind of, Gary's my captain, but Sparky's kind of my mentor and my boss. And you've seen him out there. Your kids and your grandkids would love him. And he's a very important part of our messaging. So that's why I put him up there, just looking over my shoulder, making sure that I do a good job for him today. So today, myself and Gary are going to talk about, I kind of call them our 3 pillars of defense for public education. And the pillars are prevention, detection, and escape. And this message is the same message that we give to kindergartens, as we give to new Canadians, as we give to older adults. We want to get that consistent message out so that everyone's talking the same language and knows all about the importance of those 3 pillars. And then we talk about all kinds of things. After that, once we get our message out, we can talk about firefighter gear. We talk about the trucks. We talk about the jaws of life. We talk about CPR, but really, and they all tie into really those 3 pillars. So I'm going to start off a chat today on prevention, and then I'll turn it over to Gary. Gary's going to talk about detection, and then I'll finish up with escape. So again, just we really welcome your questions, and we look forward to them at the end of the presentation, and really happy to answer anything that wasn't clear or I might have missed. So I'm going to start right away with prevention. Cooking. Cooking fires, in case you didn't know, the #1 fire that I went to as a firefighter, and the #1 fire in the city of Mississauga, and even the province of Ontario, and pretty much Canada and North America, definitely the US, is unattended cooking in the kitchen. That is the #1 cause of fires. So my message has to be, we have to remember that if we're cooking, we have to stay with our cooking, because that's when a problem can happen. So if we stay with our cooking, we prevent a possible fire. We prevent a possible catastrophe. And I can tell you that a kitchen fire can really make a mess of your house. So that's one prevention message that I want to get out there, is never to leave your cooking unattended. And then a couple of the other things, keep your flammables away from the stove. So something like this, it's a towel. I know that lots of people hang it on the oven door, and it looks great there, especially if it's real fancy. But the problem with that is, if you're heating your oven, or it gets closed into the oven, or if you're cleaning it and the cleaning gets super hot, that can cause this thing to start on fire. And I've had calls where that has been the case. Or it can be left too close or on top of the stove. Another thing, paper towels. They're great. Everyone has them. Don't set them next to your stove, because again, your cat could walk by or the wind could blow that onto the burner. And then you have your paper towels on fire. If you happen to leave the kitchen just for even a minute, now it's up into the cupboards. So anything flammable, if you keep them away from the stove, you'll prevent a fire from happening. And the last one I want to talk about with stoves, if you do get a fire on your stove, the best way to prevent that from getting out of control is putting a lid over top of it. And I usually have my lid and my frying pan handle with me, but I absolutely didn't bring it to my table today. But you know what I mean. If you're cooking with oil or grease and it starts on fire, the best thing you can do, don't even move it. Just try to turn off the burner And the second thing, slide a lid or a cookie sheet or anything metal, tight fitting over top of the fire. It will go out because you've taken away its oxygen. Don't never, ever, ever put water on a grease fire, ever. So again, that's prevention with the stove. Let's talk about smoking. If you do smoke, it's a really good idea to smoke outside. And if you smoke inside, please make sure that you have ashtrays that are heavy and are not going to tip over and fall onto the carpet or wherever, or to your couch. The other thing about smoking is if you live in a high rise, we've had incidents recently where people are flicking their butts off the balcony and that butt is blowing back onto someone else's balcony that have flammables or even people on them. And that's a real problem in the city. So please, if you do have a balcony and you smoke on the balcony, that's great, it's outside. Please don't flick your butts. Even if you think it's extinguished, it probably isn't. I'm going through this pretty quickly because I know I want to leave time for Gary and questions. Space heaters. It's not the time of year for space heaters, but if you do have them in the winter, please keep 1 meter of distance from the space heater to anything flammable. That will prevent something from starting on fire. And also unplug it when you leave the room, or at least turn it off. Okay? And the last thing is, again, to prevent electrical fires, never use a extension cord with a space heater because that cord gets very hot. Okay, and if you don't use those, you'll just have your single cord, and that cord is built for that type of heating unit. Couple more things. Medications. If you do take medications and you just got a new one and you read the label and it says may cause drowsiness, may cause dizziness, may cause sleepiness, please, if you're going to take it, monitor yourself. Because if you take it before bed and you go into a deep, deep sleep, and Gary's going to talk about what's going to detect the situation, a fire, you may not hear your smoke alarm. So your medications, definitely just try them out to make sure that they don't affect you adversely, or talk to your doctor about that. And then medications too, keep them together. So if you do have to escape, which I'm going to talk about, they'll be very close at hand, and you can grab some very important meds that you might need if you're out of your house for a bit. Last thing, fire safety plans are another way. If you live in a high rise, please remember every high-rise building has what's called a fire safety plan. You've seen that red box. It's the box that my captain would go to first thing when they get to a high-rise fire. And he checks inside of that box, and inside of that box is a list of people with mobility issues. Make sure that if you have mobility issues and you're living in a high-rise, make sure you're on that list. Talk to your super, talk to your landlord, whoever. Make sure you're on that list. And also, if you just recently had surgery, like hip surgery, I had hip surgery about a year ago, and I wasn't very mobile for about 3 weeks. So if you've had surgery recently, or you're planning on surgery recently, make sure you're on the list. And then the firefighters will be aware of what units we need to respond to. So that's some of the things that can prevent problems from even happening, my little suggestions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and Gary's going to talk. Let's say that we weren't able to prevent. How can we detect a problem or a fire? Go ahead, Gary.
Ryan, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I really like the fact that you highlighted the persons requiring assistance list in a building, and maybe your personal connection to something like that as well. Something that we don't often think about is upcoming procedures where we might not be so ambulatory or mobile afterwards. So yeah, connecting with the building superintendents or staff to let them know you need to be on that list would be extremely advantageous for you, and should be considered necessary. There's so many speaking points. Brian's mentioned many of them so far. It might be an opportunity for you to run and grab a notepad if you want. I know the session is being recorded, and we'll be able to get some of that information afterwards from Katie as to how we can connect with it. But fantastic points there, Brian. I'm going to talk a little bit about detection now and how we can detect a fire emergency. So it could be a fire and life safety emergency, and we'll talk about the fire and the life safety emergencies and how we can detect them a little bit, okay? So we can implement all those measures that Brian just spoke about, and inadvertently we can still have accidents happen, right? We could have left a lighter or a match out, and we had a grandchild over or a friend with a young child over, and now they're interested in that lighter. We know that boys ages 6 to 9 are very prone to fire play and very interested. So when Brian and I connect with children at that age, we always make sure we emphasize, don't pick up lighters and matches. Let a parent or parent guardian know if you see a lighter or a match somewhere. So don't be surprised if you do have grandchildren or you connect with a young child that now they're going to point it out like it's the bad news item on the table, and it is to them. So they shouldn't be touching that. So I'll leave that with you as well. But if you do have a fire emergency in your home, we have to make sure we detect it. There's different things we can try and do. Let's say I'm going to speak to the average, let's say a two-story home where we have maybe a basement, a main floor, and a second floor. In that home, we're required to have a smoke alarm on every level of our house. Okay, so a small basement, one on the main floor, and one on the top floor, just outside the sleeping area where we sleep. Okay. These devices, they don't last forever. On the side of mine, it tells me that I need to replace it by 2024. So now I know in just a little over 2 years, I need to make sure I replace this device. Most of them are good for about 10 years. And to know how old it is, you can look at the side of it. And on some of the older models, they'll even say it on the very bottom. That's the one you need to replace it by. One thing that's not good for 10 years is the batteries that are found in it. You can see that this one has two 9-volt batteries, all right? And to know if those batteries are still working or not, what I like to do is just a really simple test of the smoke alarms, okay? So Mississauga Fire Emergency Services will recommend that you test your smoke alarms on a monthly basis, okay? And if you're unable to test them, maybe you can get somebody to help you test them. Who's able to reach them safely. We don't really want anybody climbing on chairs to testing smoke alarms, so the back end of a broom pole is often a good suggestion, one I've heard Brian mention to people before to use. I'm going to test this smoke alarm so you can hear what it sounds like. Yeah, there you go, Brian. Thank you. You can hear what it sounds like. And I'm gonna press the test button now. It's not overly loud, but for any of you who might have headphones on, maybe you can just hold it out for just a little bit. I'll put my finger over the speaker so it's not as loud either. But to test it, all we're going to have to do is press this button on the front and it says test. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right. So that there, know that I've got a fire emergency in my home. This is an ionization smoke alarm. It detects, it's going to detect that smoke and it'll alert anybody in the home that there's smoke present. It's only good if it's working. So you got to make sure your smoke alarms are working, and that might be a little bit of homework for us today, is to make sure we've got working smoke alarms. They're all a little different. You can see that this one even has a little light on it because we know that smoke is heavy, dark, thick. It sits at the ceiling, makes it difficult to see. We need to get low to get out and go, which I'll leave Brian to speak to in a minute here. But that's the general function of this one. They're found in every level of our home, outside of our bedrooms. They're only good for 10 years. You should test them on a monthly basis, okay? So I'm going to put that one down. And we'll talk about another device in our home which could really help us. And I'm going to get Brian to help us out in a minute here because he's got one of those handy. It's called a carbon monoxide alarm. Yeah, or a combination device. So you can have a smoke alarm like this one here. You can have a carbon monoxide alarm, which is a standalone device, or you can have a combination device like the one that Brian's holding. And what that's going to do is detect carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide forms in the home from fuel burning appliances such as your furnace, a hot water tank, right, that are being fueled, maybe your stove or a fireplace, and some people even have gas-powered fueled dryers. Another thing too, solid fuel burning. So if you have a fireplace in your home, or maybe you like to go to a cottage, if you have a fireplace, you can get carbon monoxide emitting off of that fuel source and building up in your home. Carbon monoxide is odorless, tasteless, colorless. You won't know it's there until you start feeling some of the side effects. And at the lower exposure limits, you're going to start to feel nauseous, maybe even a little bit tired. And typically when people feel that way, they'll want to go to the bedroom to go have a sleep. So homes in Ontario are required to have a carbon monoxide alarm on outside the sleeping areas in their home that have a fuel burning appliance, a solid fuel burning appliance, or an attached storage garage, such as a place where you can park your car in, because that can emit carbon monoxide as well and make you feel very ill. So they have to be found outside the sleeping areas. They're only good for 5 to 7 years. Some manufacturers have them up to 10 years now. And the test feature for them is very similar. Maybe, Brian, if you don't mind testing yours for us, we can all hear what it says. And I think, Brian, is yours bilingual?
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, this one actually, it speaks English and French, and it's going to first let you know that there's a fire with 3 loud beeps. And then it's going to check for CO, or carbon monoxide, and it's going to do 4 beeps. So that's why it's called a combination alarm. It does both in one. And also the other beauty of this device, Gary was talking about batteries. This device has a 10-year battery, so no more worrying about changing out those batteries every 6 months. The battery will last for 10 years, and that's the life of the piece of equipment. So whenever you want me to, Gary, I'm just going to press the test button, and you're going to hear what it sounds like and what it says, and we know it's working.
Fantastic. Please do, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, just mind your ears. Back to you, Gary.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Not sure exactly what happened there. It got pretty quiet on your end, Brian, but we could faintly hear it, and no problem at all. I'm sure it was probably pretty loud where you are. They're all required to sound at a certain rating. They're listed and certified to a specific standard. At your pillow, you should have at least 75 decibels of sound when that smoke alarm is going off. Okay, but that can be dramatically reduced if we have some things going on in our environment. Let's say we have our bedroom door closed, a TV on, a radio on, a ceiling fan going, or maybe a loud sleeper next to us. Maybe our sleep partner snores. Maybe our sleep partner uses a CPAP machine, which can be pretty loud. Or maybe ourselves, we're hard at hearing, or we have hearing aids that we take out at the nighttime. Some of those things are going to be things that we should probably start thinking about that are going to diminish our ability to hear as clearly as maybe we once did or we would like to. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, you might want to consider getting interconnected smoke alarms, right? So there's a wire that goes from this one to another one to another one. And then you can also have them hooked up to a strobe light. So they actually flash at you. They flash really brightly. So the flash, you can certainly still see with your eyes closed, and they alert most people when they're sleeping. And one other thing you could consider getting is a bed shaker. So some smoke alarms can be connected to a bed shaker, which will shake the bed to alert you that there's a fire emergency in your home. I think that kind of scratches all the things I wanted to talk to you about detection there. So smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 minutes, Brian, you don't mind sharing with us a little bit about having a home escape plan. And if you'd like to discuss the 911 a little bit, you can, or throw it to me and we'll wrap up with that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Gary. That was great. So, like I said earlier, just as a review, we need to be able to prevent fires from even happening, prevent emergencies from even happening. We need to, if they do happen, we need to detect them. And then the last thing is we need to be able to escape them. And escape is critical as well, because that's going to get you out of your house as soon as you hear your smoke alarm. And just in regards to smoke alarms, a piece of information that I just recently came across, almost 50% of the homes in the city of Mississauga don't have working smoke alarms on the fire floor when a fire happens. That number is just ridiculously low. We need to be up at compliance. We need to be at compliance closer to, well, 100%. We need working smoke alarms to get us out, to warn us of a fire. And I'm sure if you've watched the media all throughout the winter, some really devastating fires in the province, and some of them were caused by no smoke alarms or smoke alarms that weren't working, that didn't go off. So when we hear the alarm, we need to escape, and we need to escape immediately. And some of the little things that I want to remind you about is it depends where you live. If you live in a house or you live in an apartment or you live in a condo, it depends on where you're living, but you should be able to identify every way out of where you live. And that could include, well, obviously doors, but that could also include windows. And I know that getting out a window is not going to be an option for some people, but you know what? If you can't get out the door and you can't escape, the window is your next best option, or the balcony is your next best option, because when the fire crews arrive, and they could arrive in anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, they're going to see you and they're going to initiate a rescue. And even if the police get there sooner or a neighbor sees you there, they might have a ladder in their backyard. And a lot of times a neighbor has helped someone before the fire department even arrived, and the police do too. So you need to be able to escape, and escape any way you can. Identify some escape areas where you live. And the next thing is, once you do escape, let's say you're not living alone. You're living with a spouse or a partner, or you're living with your grandkids or your extended family. Very important that you have a meeting place once you escape. Because nowadays in extended family homes, some people sleep upstairs, some people sleep in the basement, some people could even sleep on the main floor. And when that fire alarm goes off, people aren't going to be able to check on everyone unless they're infants or very small children. They're just going to escape to the meeting place. And once everyone's to the meeting place, you'll know that everyone got out and that everyone has got together at that meeting place. So very important. And examples would be the neighbor's yard or the neighbor's porch or the neighbor's tree or a tree outside of your condo or the sidewalk. The lobby of your high-rise building or the condo is not a good meeting place because firefighters are coming into the building and they've got lots of big equipment, and I must admit, you're in the way and you're putting yourself in danger. And I can tell you that from experience. So please don't congregate in the lobby, okay? The other thing that I want to talk about is some things to use on a daily basis, good practice things for escape. One of the things would be by your bed. If you forget some things sometimes, I forget my address sometimes. Asked about that very quickly, I might forget it. You might forget it in a panic. So it's always a good idea to put that number 911, because that's the number that will get you emergency services in Mississauga, and then maybe write your address down. And then you're not panicky and you're not forgetting. The other thing that you could have by your bed, just a little flashlight that'll help you see your way out. And it could sit on your night table. Another thing that I sometimes recommend is having some keys or your important keys on a lanyard. And that way, this one's pretty colorful. It's University of Waterloo. Don't hold that against me. And it's a lanyard that is very easily visible. And you'll be able to find it, because I lose my keys sometimes all the time. That's the reason why I got the lanyard. One last thing that we could talk about, just a couple more, excuse me. If you have a mobility problem, you could consider moving your sleeping area, your bed, closer to the exit. So let's say you live in a 2-story house and you've lived there all your life, but now you're starting to really have some mobility issues. to be really safe, you could locate that sleeping area downstairs, maybe in a dining room that you don't use a lot, or a den that you don't use a lot anymore. And that way you've got quicker access outside. Get low and go. If it's smoky in there, and it shouldn't be too smoky because your alarm would have let you know and you're on your way out, but if for some reason it is smoky, get down low on your hands and knees. That way it's not as hot. You'll be able to see. It's the same way that a firefighter enters your house. If it's got a lot of smoke, we get down on our hands and knees and we crawl low beneath that heat and beneath that very black toxic smoke. Last thing I want to just mention, you could also consider a medic alert bracelet, and something that you could invest in, or maybe your kids or your grandkids, a great gift for someone that would feel safer and more confident if they had a bracelet or something that they could wear around their neck to alert emergency services. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about. Don't forget, if you use a walker or a cane, keep that close to your bed as well, and get out of your house as quickly as possible and go to that safe meeting place. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to let Gary talk about 911.
Excellent. Excellent, Brian. Thank you so much. Are we doing okay for time, Katie? I know I'm maybe thinking about chatting for about a few more minutes, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
Yeah, you're perfect. We have about 5 more minutes and then we'll open it for Q&A.
This is fantastic timing. Okay, great. So our good friend and I think colleague too, Catherine Timon, she put a great question into the chat. She said, what do you recommend if your high-rise condo has no balcony? So that's becoming quite popular, I think, for most building designs now. And it's a question that we have pretty often. So I think when a lot of people think about fire rescue, they think about leaving it to the last minute, where potentially we're having to get an aerial unit from one of our fire trucks to put up a big ladder to your balcony to get you off, right? We want to make sure that that's an absolute last resort and almost a bit of a drastic emergency, I would suggest. If you're able to, so we're going to talk about shelter in place. If you're able to evacuate safely, as Brian said, we want to make sure you evacuate safely. Okay, so it's best to get out. But if you can't get out, you can't get out of your unit because there's a fire impeding both of your exits, both your ways out. Maybe in the hallway right outside your door, there's a fire and there's smoke. You can't get out. What you're going to need to do is make sure you shelter in place, which means you're going to gather your family or anybody that's in your home, go into a bedroom, a room with a window preferably, and close that door. You're going to call 911 and let them know what your address is, what your unit is, and who's with you. As well as, of course, what the emergency is, and if there's an emergency in your unit. You're going to close that door and have somebody put something at the bottom of the door to prevent smoke from coming into the unit. And if need be, you're going to open the window. We wouldn't recommend doing that until it's needed, or you're trying to get the alert or get the attention of firefighters down below. And at that point, they will make an attempt to set up a ladder or make entry to your unit with fire hoses and whatnot that are in the building. Now that is pretty drastic, and there's a lot of things we can do to make sure we don't run across a situation like that. And that's having that early warning detection system. So those smoke alarms that work, if you're in a high-rise building, you have what's called smoke detectors. They're connected to a fire alarm system, and when they go off, the entire building goes off, not just that standalone smoke alarm that's inside your unit. It would likely be connected to a monitoring system that you could contact 911 directly. Never take that for granted, even if you hear the fire alarm system going, and you should contact 911. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question, Catherine, and what to do if you can't leave the building. 911, fantastic service that you can call for a variety of services, right, that you'll get. The three that come to mind most often are police, fire, and paramedic. So if you have a medical emergency, you're likely going to get the fire department as well as a paramedic. And if you have like an emergency requiring police assistance, of course, they'll provide that too. I think it's important, and I might just suggest that to get to know your neighbors and to get to know your friends or anybody who's connecting with you, And maybe some of your neighbors are taking new medications, and if they have a medical emergency, it might be nice to know where they keep their medications, right? They're up high and locked away, so that maybe grandchildren or visitors can't get to them. But to know what they take and know where the medications are, so you can share that information with a first responder, it would be really important for them to know that. 911, again, is to be used for emergencies. If you need help, call that number and they'll direct your help as quickly and best as possible. Ryan and I have shared a lot of information with you. I know if I were taking notes on it, we'd have probably 4 or 5 pages worth of information. I'm excited to hear that this is a recorded session that we can kind of go back and review it a little later on.